This is the Rat Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
For 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is, holy cow, August the 17th, 2023 already. And this is episode 354 of Workshop Radio. How the hell is everyone out there this evening? Great to see you. We're going to open up with another edition of I Shit You Not, named by fellow delinquent Chris Dixon, The Origin of Preppers' Vocabulary and Phrases. So tonight I thought, hey, let's do a dive into something everybody's heard. Probably nobody knows where it comes from. And you might not know after I'm done telling you the story, but we'll try. 2 is 1, 1 is none. And if you're a patch, 3 is a guarantee. But in this case, we're going to talk about 2 is 1, 1 is none. And of course, like almost every prepper phrase out there, it's an old adage attributed to the military, specifically the Navy SEALs. Most people say that anyway. From my reading and some of the notes I took here, they said it was tough to pinpoint the exact start of the quote, but it's been referenced for at least half a century. A few people have claimed that it started with the Army Rangers, but for the most part, they say it's been ingrained in current Navy SEAL culture, laying doubt to that claim. So the best I can find is that it started in the mid-20th century. So, 1950s, 1960s. However, you type it in ChatGPT, and I'm going to just bitch a little bit, but ChatGPT is practically broken at this point. I did lots of research on my own as well on this one, but I couldn't find anything anyway, the earliest I could find, I did a search in Google Books, and I found a January-February 1994 edition of U.S. Army Aviation Digest. I thought that was kind of cool. It's insane how much just content has been created over the generations that's just out there. I love Google Books. Anyway, this was written by a captain in the Attack Helicopter Regiment. I thought this was pretty cool. They said, this also built into a high degree of team coordination with internal roles and responsibilities, clearly established and produced some very effective Army-wide training support. That was an acronym there, but I filled it out for you. Without exception, we executed all of our missions with the Army-wide training, 2 aircraft as the basic combat element. 2, remember that. This ensured each aircraft was some degree of immediate suppressive fire and provided for coordinated reconnaissance of a specified... Man, some of this stuff. We adopted the phrase 2 is 1, 1 is none as troop doctrine, so that other aircraft always had backing fire. And I thought, that was the earliest I could find. There were 2 other fiction references to that exact phrase right in that same time, but this was January 1994. So that takes it back 30 years. I know 94 is almost 30 years ago, but it was kind of cool. I found this on Preparedness Hub as well. It said, take, for example, Teddy Roosevelt, our future 26th president, needed his glasses to see clearly, especially when in battle. Instead of trusting fate that his glasses would remain on his face, and in fact, he often rode into battle with a dozen or more pairs of glasses on his person, including one sewn into his cap. The battle at San Juan would have gone very differently for Roosevelt if he had brought only one pair, as his Rough Riders would have had a nearly blind leader sending them into battle. I thought that was kind of cool. An old-time example of 2 is 1, 1 is none, the earliest written use of it that I could find. And of course, here we are, but once again, military phraseology, terminology. And I think a lot of that comes out of the 80s with the survivalist mindset, with a lot of ex-military coming into it. And then, of course, the internet and the rise of forum culture. So, announcements. Let's get them out of the way. Thursday night, guys. Remember our brother, Fortress Canine, Joel Riles from the Protection Dog podcast. That dude, he's more than just a friend. He's a brother. He's an all-around good dude who has rebuilt his life incredibly If you've been in here for any time, you've heard his story. If you haven't, if you happen to be new to the podcast and you need something else to fill your ear holes, stick Fortress Canine or the Protection Dog podcast in your ears. And you might say, Tim, but I don't need to know about dogs. Yeah, well, most of what Joel talks about is rebuilding your life, motivation, discipline, and getting shit done, building the life you want to live. So check him out, guys. Always. His link is in the description. Number 2, there's 4 weeks left for Prepper Camp tickets. Pick them up. Links in the description. They shut them off 2 weeks before the show, so you can't even get them if you want to at the door. We're having a get-together, a workshop get-together in Illinois. The porta potty's been ordered, according to Aaron, which is exciting. It's going to be a good time. Went from just an informal get-together to a sit-around, have a Q&A session, a bitch session, hopefully a live stream, which will be great. A walk in the woods to take a look at some local plants, take a look at Nate's rabbitry. I think that's the right thing. It's not a tree with rabbits on it, but it's a place where rabbits live. Yeah, going to be a good time. And throw this out here too. I don't know if you can see this, but it says, try that in a small town. That is the brand new shirt that just came from Special Operations Equipment. Showed up today. Kind of a cool one. So I thought you'd like to see that. Real quick, I want to give you an update this week in the workshop, and then we're going to get into the 2003 Blackout. But first off, I got the logo changed on the truck. If you're in the Telegram group, you've seen it. I haven't posted it on social yet, just because I just wanted to make sure everything was signed as far as that goes. I know, Jules, it's a pretty cool shirt. I like this one a lot. I got 2 this week from John, so thank you, John. Hey, Martinson family. Great to see everybody in here. We got Byrons, we got Jules, Haas, Waytime Design, Blakesley Acres. Great to see everybody. The Dixon Way. Yes, we always love to see Mr. Dixon in here. He even took off some work this evening to hang in with us for a little while. So, got the logos changed in the truck. Why am I saying that? The business is officially Toolman Tim's Property Management. And then I went to the lawyer thinking, hey, we're going to sign the contract to finally sell All Seasons Maintenance. Nope, it was just a sit down and discuss things session, which meant that puts the signing of the contract for the sale to next Wednesday. But it will be signed, sealed, and delivered by the end of the month, because that's the deadline, August 31st. I wanted it done long before I left to go to the States. And yeah, so this is the weirdest thing, guys. So I was yesterday morning, I got an email, missed it until 10 minutes after the email was for. I got a request from a news company to be on a live broadcast discussing the natural gas explosion in Pennsylvania. And I seen the email 10 minutes after they were supposed to go live. It would have been cool, but I can't remember the name of the company, but it used to be WGN. They've changed. I thought it was just some kind of internet thing, and so I didn't really pay much attention to it. And I go in, I'm like, shit, this is a real news broadcast. So it would have been cool. It didn't happen, but if it happens again someday, I guess we'll see, right? And I want to tell you guys one more story about community. This one was good. I don't have the person's name to share because I forgot to ask for permission, so I can't do that. But I want to tell you about how growing community works. 3-4 weeks ago, I reached out to James Wesley Rawls and wanted him to come on the show. And he got back to me super quick, which was awesome. Turned out to be an incredible interview, as you guys know. He posted that show on his survival blog, and just the YouTube alone which is really cool. But that's not the cool part. I could care less about that. The best part was I got an email from a fellow Albertan, of all things, not much more than a half an hour away from here, who found me through the blog, through the post on James' website. And so we chatted. We had like-minded, just like, when Crazy Chris messaged me a couple years ago and said, hey, I'm going to come up and visit you. Do you mind? And I'm like, sure, as long as you're not a serial killer. Anyway, spent 4 hours yesterday afternoon just having a wonderful conversation with yet another preparedness-minded fellow. And, if he decides we want him to, if he wants to become part of the greater community, that'll be great. But just the fact that we meet like-minded folk within... How crazy is it? I reach out to a dude who wrote a book, in the late 90s, early 2000s, get him on the show. He lives in Idaho, posted on his website, and somebody finds my content from just over half an hour away. That's how this works, guys. This is why we do what we do in the workshop, and it blows me away. So there it is, guys. I thought that was, that's the kind of stuff that gives me chills down my back, because it's just awesome meeting new people. All right. So who remembers the 2003 blackout? Now, I'll share my memory with you, but it was a Thursday evening. I was working at Dairy Queen. I was a night supervisor, but we always took Thursday evenings off. We always made the new people work Thursday evenings. And there was a reason for that, because the Sunset Tavern in Digby, where I grew up, had 2-for-1 seafood, and they had 15-cent wings. How long ago was that it was 15-cent wings? Hey, guys. So we were all done that evening. I was getting ready to head out. We got out to the bar, and they had CNN on the big screen out there. Now, for whatever reason, it was mainly because we were tied into Quebec Hydro. The Maritimes, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, didn't get affected by the blackout, but it was absolutely a big deal. It was everywhere. I mean, 50 million people without power. And of course, there were stories and innuendo and guesses, and who knew? Nobody knew what was happening, but at least at the time, because we were less than 2 years post 9/11. So everybody had all their ideas of what was going on. But no matter what, and we've talked about the blackout of the 50s, the blackout of the 70s, and or the 80s, sorry. And this will be the last North American blackout we talk about in the disaster series. But this was a big deal. This was by far the largest for people. Now, could you imagine? It ended up not lasting as long as we thought it would. But could you imagine if something like that hit 50, 55 million people and they were without power for a week or 2 weeks? And this was August, remember. So August 14th was 20 years ago. That's why we're talking about this. I almost thought about doing a special episode just on that evening, but I figured, hey, we're close enough on Thursday, aren't we? So yeah, we went out for wings. We sat down and had some beer and had 15-cent wings and 2-for-1 seafood, and we watched it all unfold on the TV. It was weird being separated from it, but it was definitely a thing that was going on and was definitely top of mind. Dixon said he was in an oblivious state in 2003. News to him. Right on. That's okay. I mean, I can see how people on the prairies wouldn't even really know. But Jules said, I knew I recognized it. That's where I was living at the end of the course. It was on cable. Blackout was just before my wedding in Ohio. Waytime design. That's crazy. Crazy. And Jules says, I don't remember this happening, but then again, I'm older now and forget things easier. Doesn't have to do with age. It's just brain. I'm telling you, I do the same thing all the time. So, like always, let's break down the event, how it happened. Of course, it's just like, what do they call it? Ghost in the Machine. It doesn't take much for, it's kind of funny. You go back to the blackout of the 80s, the 70s, the both previous blackouts, and each time they implemented systems into place so that, guess what? It wouldn't happen again. But as we know, every time they think that it won't happen again, it happens again. So noon, just after, quarter after noon, the power estimating software fails. A worker fixes it, but forgets to restart it. So you're going to see a chain of events of a whole bunch of things that get overlooked that cause this. Like always, it's what happens. They build redundancies into these systems. The problem is that no matter how many redundancies you build into something, you don't account for human fallibility. So anyway, at 12:15, the power estimating software fails. That's the software where they say, okay, we need to send this much power here, because the lines need to be balanced. Worker's like, oh, I'll fix it. He does, but it's like, plugging a computer back in but forgetting to turn it on. That's what happened. So, hey, Leather Homestead, great to have you. 1:30, hour and 15 minutes later, a plant in Ohio shuts down. But for some reason, they didn't really notice it. 2:02, high transmission line fails as a tree from a wildfire makes contact with them and shorts them out. An alarm system designed to alert the workers, both audible and visual, fails. And it's not found out that this happens. So you have a plant shut down, you have a high transmission line fail, you have the power estimating software isn't working and nobody notices it. And then your alarm system that's supposed to say, hey, we got alarm, we got a line down, we have a transmission plant shut down. None of this is being here, right? Nobody knows what's going on. Anyway, 3:32. So 3 hours and 15 minutes later, the system starts moving power around because it's like, hey, we're short here. So they do this. Hey, Rachel Brown, great to have you. Power shifted to other lines. Guess what happens? As they're putting more power through the lines heat up. What do? They sag. And as they sag, guess what happens? They're hot, they're saggy, they come into contact with trees. And guess what? Even more lines fail. They short out, they burn up, boom. So at 346, we now have 5 high transmission lines in Ohio that have gone dark. 406, a power surge leaves, not leaves Ohio, but is heading toward Cleveland, and it overloads 3 more high transmission lines. That was at 406. And by 4:10 p.m., the blackout starts and everything just kind of cascades very, very quickly, because at this point you've got 8 high transmission lines that are no longer adding their amount of power to the grid. And then it just goes boom, 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 basically down the New England eastern seaboard and, of course, up into good old Toronto. And Becky, my wife, has memories of that. She lives in Sarnia, which is the chemical capital of Canada. And when the power was out there, a lot of the containment systems on some of the plants didn't work real well. And so they had some chemical gases and clouds that were heading toward them that kind of felt like something out of The Simpsons, anyway, from what I've heard. And she said they had to put towels down and everything was fine, but it was quite a worrisome time at that point. So that was the breakdown of what happened, the numbers. Now, I think part of the reason why it's not as well remembered as some of the others is because the worst of the power outage was out in about 8 hours. So it went at 4. By midnight Eastern time, about half the people were back up. Some people had no power until 48 hours later. So there were some people who were without for almost 2 days. Backwoods Butcher, I hope your versus thing went really good tonight, where you guys were fighting over meat or something over on the live stream. Now they're doing a butcher showdown over there for Self-Reliance Festival. Seeking Adventure Family, thank you for doing the story. We discuss this outage at least every Black Start training. Nice, good to have you. This is a story. This is, of course, the one that's the closest to my heart because it happened in Canada also. But yeah, it's interesting. So, all right, power was out for at least 8 hours for most people, up to 48 in some areas. At the largest point, depending on where you looked, you had between 50 and 55 million people without power. Now, when you see the map, it doesn't look that big, but when you realize the cities that were encapsulated in that tiny little red area, yeah, well, at that point, it was almost a quarter of North America's population. Basically. 265 power stations shut down, 265 with 508 generating units. They took a total of 60,000 megawatts off the grid. Now, that sounds like a lot. That sounds like Doc Brown numbers right there, guys. I'm not really sure what the hell 60,000 megawatts actually equals, but either way, that's more than a metric shit ton. The states affected: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio, a small area of Pennsylvania, and a little old place that most people don't know of called Ontario. So it was a mess. I mean, you have just Toronto and New York City right there alone, and a bunch of other cities all mixed in. But that's massive. Tons of people without power. Like I said, the majority of people, and took forever to get back online. Exactly. And even as they were bringing things back online, I read an interview with the mayor of Toronto at the time. They were telling people to report their neighbors if they were using AC, because they were still, as they were bringing things back online, they couldn't overtax the system. And so, it was the whole mindset of watch your neighbors and report them to the Gestapo, right? So what was the cause exactly? So, of course, what happens when shit like this happens? There's a sacrificial lamb, and then the government, applies a third party kind of body to investigate, and they're like, hey, let's do a report on this, and it'll cost millions of dollars and take way too long. And it took about 2 years for the report. So this was a quote that I found. It says the blackout's proximate cause was a software bug in the alarm system at the control room of First Energy in Akron, Ohio. Who hears from Ohio? Because it was their fault. It rendered operators unaware of the need to redistribute the load after overloaded transmission lines dropped into foliage. What should have been a very manageable local blackout cascaded into the collapse of much of the Northeast Regional electricity distribution system. I thought that was interesting. So we've done 3 massive blackouts at this point. Well, 2 plus tonight's, and all 3 were on the East Coast. Now, that got me thinking. I was like, all right, well, if they've all been on the East Coast, every big power outage I've ever heard of, what was the largest power outage on the West Coast? I had to look this up because I'm a sucker for facts, right? And July 2nd, 1996 was the largest blackout on the West Coast. It affected 8 states and 4 million people due to an unseasonably warm temperatures and an unseasonably large demand on the power system because people were trying to run their AC unit. So July 6th. So to put that into perspective, the largest blackout on the West Coast was 4 million people. The largest on the East Coast was 55 million people. If that tells you a little bit about population distribution, right? Yeah. Byron Roberts says, I wonder how many neighbors got stitches for being a snitch. Well, you know how that goes, right? So I actually came across something that I kind of geeked out about today, and I don't want to break it down too much, but about 10 years after the blackout, the Journal of Epidemiology did a study on the 2003 blackout and its effect on mortality. And I thought this was really kind of cool, actually. And some of you will be like, oh my God, he's such a geek. But I'd never found a kind of scientific study on the effect of a blackout or the blackout's effect on excess mortality. In other words, how many deaths tend to increase, what percentage of people tend to die above the mean when there's blackouts. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. So in the report, they said there were 90 excess deaths over that 24-hour period that they counted. Of the 90, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody, 63 of them were 65 and older. So that means, a lot of them died from issues health related, right? So the study found there was an overall 28% spike in deaths during the outage. 12 of those additional deaths were caused by accidents, 38 by cardiovascular conditions, 3 from respiratory problems, and 37 from other various health conditions. So once again, underlying health issues, right? So the factors that and some of this is direct quotes. If anybody wants to know, you can find it there. But the factors that they found were the biggest. So I guess let me back up a little bit first. To know the factors that they recognized. Yeah. Dixon says, who makes the norm median? Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Excess, right? I mean, numbers go up and down, but it was interesting. They took in weather accounts, they took in pollution, a bunch of different things. I guess the best they could do. So they put the overlying issues that they pointed to that caused the biggest issues for people during power outages. So the first one that they listed was stress. And of course, stress. I mean, if you're not healthy cardiovascular and then you put stress on it and then you put a bunch of exercise on top of that, it could be bad. But they said people trapped in the subway in the dark and didn't know what happened, especially post 9/11, as they said. People were really scared. And of course, stress can trigger a heart attack or it can make asthma a lot worse. Breathing issues were another one. So stress was one. If you tend to be a stressed out person, it can be a bit of an issue there. Breathing issues. They said, this was interesting. And I wouldn't have thought of this. Again, a lot of these are just, if we just kept our ass at home, a lot of these things wouldn't be such a big deal, right? Hey, Jake from Ravenwood Acres. Breathing issues. Increased air pollution from idling buses and other sources also aggravated respiratory conditions. I thought that was interesting. They said they found that hospital admissions for respiratory conditions increased during blackouts. So again, look out for stress, look out for people with breathing issues, look out for yourself with breathing issues, lack of resources. Most food sources and pharmacies were closed. Now, of course, for one day, it's not the end of the world, but they said it could have been a serious problem for people with diabetes or someone who is low on prescription meds. I mean, sure. Now, 24 hours, hopefully you have more than that on hand and you never, ever let your prescriptions get that low. But not everybody does that, right? Unfortunately. First responders issues. Ambulances were slower. Home medical equipment that used electricity failed. Cell phones didn't work throughout a big portion of the blackout. Makes sense. All of that, bad things. But it's something to think about. I thought this report was kind of cool. I didn't go into any more detail on it than that with you because I just wanted to get the highlights of it. And yeah, it was interesting. All right. Now, the next thing we do, if you're new here, I like to look over some of the victims that happen in some of these natural disasters or unnatural disasters, and not to glorify or not to take advantage of things like this that happen, but hopefully to learn lessons from things that happen, maybe to honor the people who died, because at this point, 20 years later, a lot of these people would have been forgotten. But they're interesting stories, and if nothing else, we can use their story to maybe learn a lesson ourselves or to teach a lesson to somebody else. But the youngest victim was a Scott Marshall. He was 16-year-old from Guelph, which is in Ontario. He was a grade 11 student at a vocational institute. This was right from the newspaper. It said he died Saturday from injuries he received when he was hit by a vehicle on Speedvale Avenue. Marshall was riding his bike home from a friend's house during the massive blackout. It was 10:34 at night, and Scott's bike didn't have a light on it, and he wasn't wearing a helmet. Whew. Now, he was 16. I get it. I never wore a helmet, so I'm not going to judge. But being out in the in a blackout, in darkness, non-illuminated, on a bike, not good. We talked about this in the New York City blackout and how people ended up down. Oh, we also talked about it in the LA riots, how the elderly lady who was trying to take food to a friend of hers ended up getting killed in a car accident. A lot of this stuff is not the things you'd think of. It's not people falling down the stairs in a darkened stairway. It's people trying to go out and do the right thing when you should just stay the hell home, right? Another one, a father, I couldn't find much more information than this, but a father of two was hit by a car in his front yard in Ottawa. And I'm not like, what are the chances? So I assume, again, it was after dark, but it was a car crash or a car that ended up in the front yard of his house, ended up striking him and killing him. I mean, just absolutely, again, stay in your house, right? This one was kind of sad, but this burn victim, he was a power line worker from 2001. He had an accident where he ended up losing 2 legs and an arm and had massive skin grafts all over his body. And I didn't know this, but apparently with those type of skin grafts, he ended up, his skin lacked the ability to cool himself anymore. And so his AC failed. His skin grafts couldn't cool properly. And to me, that sounds like a really bad way to go. If I was his family, I would have made sure that there was some serious backup of some sort for AC. Just absolutely, yeah, Jesus. Anyway, Dixon says, like massive snowfalls, how many people die trying to dig themselves or neighbors out, right? Everybody trying to be a hero. The snow ain't going nowhere. If you wait till April, it'll be fucking gone anyway. But absolutely, Chris. I mean, people push themselves. They try to do way too much. I think, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, but I think a lot of it comes from you lose control in these events, right? You feel like you have no control over it because you get this massive event happening to you from outside of yourself. And you want to do something. You want to be moving around. You want to be busy. When the prudent thing is to stay at home. But no, a lot of people don't want to do that. That's the hard thing. Bugging in place, I can just imagine would be rather boring. I had Phil and April on the podcast a couple of years ago from Matter of Facts. And they went through that massive hurricane and they just had to stay in their house, huddle in place for quite some time. And, their kids were stressed out. They were stressed out. They were playing board games, but it was the absolute only thing that saved them was by sheltering in place. Jules said, I've experienced the massive snowfalls, one in Colorado in the 90s and the Texageddon in 2021 in Texas. And Backwoods says, I've gone off the road helping people more than I have just sliding off the road. Yes, it's true. And I'm not saying don't be someone to help, but don't be a superhero. Don't take unnecessary chances, guys. If the weather's really shit and you think you got a really good chance of getting stuck trying to pull somebody out, don't friggin' stop, or at least don't stop until you have another vehicle there that can look after you if you do, right? Just a few years ago when we were heading south, we were driving down to San Diego and we were going through the mountains, and it went from sunny and 15 degrees Celsius. So quite warm, quite nice. And we get up into the mountains and all of a sudden we hit this wet blizzard. And this little Subaru passes by me. And I look down, I don't know, to change the radio or something. And I look back up and he's gone. And Becky's like, look out, he went. And he just went whoom, right off in the ditch upside down. And of course, I was driving without my shoes on. I know some people will slam me for that, but that's one of the things I do, especially if I'm wearing sandals. But anyway, so I had to get my shoes on, and we had to, we got them out of their vehicle and got them into, it was either our vehicle or my mother-in-law's vehicle, and let them sit there for a while. But we had two vehicles with us. I would have still stopped, but geez, you don't know, right? And Dixon says, being alone with one's thoughts is super scary for some people. Yep, it's true. I mean, well, most of us aren't used to that at this point in this day and age either, right? We're used to having our phones or our AirPods, anything, something blaring in our face all the time. And to be alone with your thoughts when you haven't given serious consideration to your life in years could be tough for people. 2 people died in New York City from carbon monoxide poisoning. That was generator related. 1 from a heart attack climbing stairs, 2 from a fire. We'll talk about this stuff a little bit more. A Detroit man was killed when he was running his generator inside his house from carbon monoxide poisoning. And a Pittsfield, Michigan, 27-year-old man died from a fire caused by candles. Again, candles, generators, bad. Heart attack from climbing stairs, never a good thing. You know, maybe climb the stairs a little more often, I guess. So what were the big dangers that people faced, the things that you wouldn't think of? And I've got some, I guess, funny, humorous kind of stories to share as we go along here. But so the dangers that I kind of outlined here, the number 1, of course, was cardiovascular issues. And I just put to stay in shape, take the stairs once in a while. It's something I'm working on again because it is my biggest failure as a prepper is not being in shape. And I know that, and it's important. So stay in shape, work on it, walk, run, climb stairs, whatever you can, just so if something happens that it's a hot friggin' day and the power goes out and you need to climb stairs, 30 sets of stairs to get home, then, take your time. The heat issue was huge. Have a backup way to cool yourself. Most people, I mean, this was 2003. So, most people had air conditioning at that point, especially in Ontario where Becky was, but have a box fan with some batteries to run it or something, just a way to at least get some of that perspiration off you and kind of cool yourself down. At the minimum, have a small fan or a small window AC unit, that kind of stuff. Nate says, this was the power outage due to weather and trees coming down. Yeah, it was. It was a combination of trees coming down on the high pressure, on the high voltage lines, but also the main reason it got so bad was because of 2 computer issues. So one failed and 1 was overlooked. So just a whole bunch of dumb luck all at once. Carbon monoxide poisoning. I talk about it a bunch, especially in my preparedness presentations, but it's important. Test your alarms. This should go without saying, but make sure your alarm has a backup battery as well, because that's something you don't always think about. Don't run your generator inside. Don't even run it within at least 10 feet of your home. When I lived out in down Digby Neck 10, 12 years ago, probably 13, when I was working at Home Hardware, there was an old couple who died in their bed because they had a generator running inside their porch during a hurricane. Burnt their house down, right? Not good. And it should go without saying, right? Fires. That's the other one. Keep your generators. Yeah, Elmer Fudd here. But keep your generators away from the house. We know this, but you know what? There's somebody who's going to hear this show tonight for the first time and think, shit, I need to be a little more careful with that. Don't overload your extension cords, because here's the thing. Extension cords can be very deadly. If you pick up one of those 16 gauge little green Christmas extension cords and you try to run a 1500 watt space heater in that, well, guess what? If you've got it plugged into a 15 amp breaker on your generator, it's not going to trip, but you're going to heat that cord up to the point where it melts and could cause a fire. That's where it becomes dangerous. So pay very close attention to your extension cords. If you're going to run any distance at all, at least make sure it's a 12 gauge extension cord. Yeah, Nate, you're awesome. You took the words right out of my mouth. 12 gauge at minimum, preferably 10 gauge, because people don't realize how dangerous extension cords can be. If you plug say you plug a 2,000 watt appliance, it's kind of impossible. But if you plug a 2,000 watt appliance into a 15 amp outlet in your home, it's going to trip the breaker. That's the safety built in. The problem is if you plug in something like that into an extension cord and then plug it into a wall that that it can support, that extension cord is the weak link. It's the piece that's going to burn up because there's no breaker or fuse built into that extension cord. So just, remember that for sure. Chris Dixon says, for the love of God, buy a couple fire extinguishers. Yes, I'm actually down to 1 can of fire spray. I need to get 1 more of those. I used the last of one of them up the other day, and they're great. I love them. I love that fire spray. Not everybody loves it, but it's cheap, and you can get a bunch to have on hand because, like I say, having 5 or 6 fire spray cans around as opposed to a single fire extinguisher that you don't know if it's going to work or you forget where you put it, it's a good idea. But yes, fire extinguishers are cheap insurance. Another issue was the dangerous travel guys. First off, stay the blazes at home. If you guys haven't heard that term before, that came from Nova Scotia during the pandemic. Whatever. Anyway, it became a meme because the premier out there was absolutely so stinking hot about trying to get people to stay at home. So whatever. Anyway, stay the blazes at home. Unless it's an emergency, just don't go out. Stay in the house. Open your windows, turn your fan on if you can, but just stay the hell in your house. You know this. We all know this. But again, people get antsy. They want to walk around. They want to do things. What else? We got, it's always with quotation marks, safer to stay at home. It's always safer, except when it isn't, I always say like 90-95% of the time you're going to bug in, but occasionally you're going to bug out, and that's okay. But again, they had this deadly combination on the streets. You've got no signal lights that are working, which is bad enough, but then you have 0 street lights as well. So things that you'd normally see coming, you're not going to see coming. And again, you might be a good driver. You might be illuminated properly, but what about all the other assholes out there that aren't, right? And let's see, Jules says 4 extinguishers here in the RV and a few more in off-site. Great idea. And Backwood says if they look like my extension cords are also a tripping hazard. Yeah, it's true. Oh, Byron Roberts says 1 tip for fire extinguishers is tap the bottom of them once a year with a rubber mallet. Yes, we used to flip them once a month as well at the farm store when I worked there. It was a tip I got from the head up safety guy. We would take every fire extinguisher like this, 2 hands, and you go flip, 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 and it would just kind of agitate the powder that was in there. And then, yes, Dixon, I will. So he wants to know about the fire spray. Home Hardware has a link to it. I bought a 2-pack at Costco ages ago, maybe 3-4 years ago. I did a video where Alice and Charlotte put out a fire with it, and the shit is awesome. It's also biodegradable, and it's not a powder. I've used it on a few grease fires on the barbecue when I got carried away cooking. I need to get some more of it. It's just Costco hasn't carried it ever since. So I'm going to get Home Hardware to get a few more in. And it's a different brand, but you can get it on Amazon.com as well. It just looks like a can of, spray paint or any type of spray can at all. Dixon says we flip and bonk the bottom of the extinguishers monthly. Yeah, it's a great tip that I've never thought to share. So thank you guys for that. So comms, communications, 911 was overloaded or it wasn't even working in time. So when it was working, people couldn't get through. It reminds me of when I was in college on 9/11. We were all the way up in friggin', who knows where, middle of nowhere, New Brunswick, and our phone lines wouldn't work because they were overloaded. In New Brunswick, guys, how far is that? I don't even know how far. I mean, it was a 13-hour drive to New York City from there because we did it 4 times. So home phone and cell phone systems were overloaded or out of service altogether as well. And then on top of all of that, yes, Nate, you are right. Expect to self-rescue because first responders were slower or non-existent because number one, emergency responder lines, 911, all that was overrun with phone calls. The traffic was backed up everywhere because people either weren't moving, exactly, right? They were overworked. Their areas to get to places were packed and they were getting more phone calls. So on top of everything else, besides your comms being down, your first responders weren't coming at all. Now, of course, only in New York City was looting a problem. In this case, it was true. I tried to read other stories and couldn't find a whole lot else about looting. But here's the deal. And we're going to talk a little more about comms as well. Nate says 911 didn't work, but I bet ham radio did for the guys smart enough to have a battery backup. Yep. absolutely. So looting was an issue. It's kind of an interesting theme in this one, but in Toronto, people were out in the streets directing traffic. They were having countywide barbecues, things like that. But in New York, of course, New Yorkers are going to New York, and here we are. So the looting in New York City. Nate says ham radio. So a little bit of cognac tonight, and it's tasting really good. New York Times. You ready for this, guys? You might sense a theme in this looting pretty quick. On Rivington Street on the Lower East Side, a band of young men stole much of the inventory from the Rivington Club, even ransacking the basement. And if you didn't know what the Rivington Club was, it was a shoe store that sold athletic shoes. Another sneaker store in the area. On Eldridge Street, there was evidence that someone tried to cut the padlocks. On a dead-end block of Elizabeth Street, north of Houston, looters found that the owners of Classic Kicks had only one of every pair of shoes on display. So they threw the shoes down and they took the clothing instead. In Nolita, looters had broken the glass door of Prohibit, which had a pair of lime green and yellow slip-on Nikes in the window. Then neighbors chased them away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different sneaker stores that were looted. Nate says we'd need some rooftop Koreans. Absolutely. Now, this is the worst one. A teenager died when he fell off the roof of a Brooklyn store under attack by looters during the blackout, police said yesterday. Looters cut a hole in the roof of the Foot Locker store on Flatbush Avenue. It was the most serious in a number of looting incidents around the city on the night when crime appeared to be down, in part because of the large number of people on the streets in the early morning. So it depends on where you read this story, because when I read it from a different source, it said burglar trying to break into Foot Locker dies when they fall off the roof. But the New York Post changes the view of it, and this is the beauty of the news. A teenager died when he fell off the roof of a Brooklyn store under attack by looters during the blackout. What was he doing on the roof? Just saying. Stupid people, stupid places, stupid things. I think at that point, a person needs to take responsibility for their actions. So they beat a hole into the roof, and Nate says he was an honor roll student just looking to help. You're probably right. He was probably trying to reassemble the roof. Anyway, I joke, but it's true. Don't go to stupid places with stupid people and do stupid things. When people are looting, stay the hell home. We learned this from the LA riots episode, right? 23 people were arrested at the Foot Locker. Cops said the looters got into the store by literally punching a hole in its roof. Wow. Anyway, and then I found this little thing here. It says, shoe theft is not new to New York City. Among the photos of the blackout of 1977, there is a young man with a lanky silhouette and wide lapels of that time stepping out of a Harlem shoe store with one white shoebox in each hand. Seems like every time the power goes out in New York City, they loot the shoe stores. I kind of jumped down here. This was one more story of the Rivington Club. I accidentally inserted my notes here backwards, but that store from the Rivington Club sustained the most destruction, where the owners, an employee, and their girlfriends rushed to the store when they got a call warning them of a break-in. Again, we're going to talk about this. They get a call at 11 p.m. on Thursday that people were trying to break into their shoe store. Minutes later, when they attempted to accost the looters, they were stumbled out onto the street, 2 of them bleeding. From what they told reporters on the scene was an attack with a broken bottle. The looters fled and were not apprehended. So if we remember back to the LA riot, the gentleman who owned a factory in LA decided it would be a great idea during the riots to fly in and go take a look at his, business and see, hey, are we okay? Is it going to burn down or not and end up getting killed? Well, again, stuff can be replaced. People can't be. We used to have this stupid, it was like a community service message on Canadian TV. It was this robot, and he would spin around through all the gears in this machine. And I think his name was Astar or something. He's like, my name's Astar. And his arm gets cut off. And he's like, I can put my arm back on. You can't. In other words, dude, it's just shoes. You got insurance. Make sure you have insurance. That way you don't end up getting stabbed in the back of the neck with a broken bottle in the middle of a blackout in New York City. Simple as that. Done. Just stupid. Don't do it. So here's some cool stories. So that was the negativity. These are kind of fun. And I found a few of these and I thought, you know what? A lot of these episodes, we learn lessons from them, but there are a lot of downers too. But these were kind of interesting. This guy named Dino said he'll never forget the blackout. Just hours after the power dropped, the Ajax, Ontario man watched his wife undergo an emergency C-section at the Scarborough Hospital, which was half lit up by backup generators. They named their son before the blackout. They chose his name. They picked his name. He explained, chuckling over the irony of it afterwards. He was almost like the bringer of light because he was born and then the lights came back on. They ended up picking an Italian name for him that meant bringer of light. I thought that was cute, but they'd already picked that name before the blackout. Yeah, Jules says, the LA riots, the summer of love, and the upper West Coast, take your pick, learn from history. The problem is, who told me this the other day? I was talking to a gentleman the other day, talked about Graham Hancock saying that society has amnesia. And it's absolutely true. Thank you, Chris Dixon. It was Astar. Astar, the robot from Planet Danger. That thing has got this. You know how you get these brain worms that stick in the back of your head for years? That's always there. I can hear his high-pitched metallic voice saying, I can put my arm back on. You can't, so play safe. Creepy. Gary Hoffman lived off Ashbridge Bay, where a sewage treatment plant lost power and caused a backup of incoming waste. He was at home with his brother during the blackout when they discovered a rising tide. You know how I say a rising tide floats all boats? Well, you don't want to be floating in this one. So unbelievable. But it's true. So a backflow prevention valve in your basement drain could prevent that. Not always, but it could. So something to look at. Kelly Gallagher said, I was 8.5 months pregnant with my firstborn, working on the 36th floor of a downtown tower. I still remember my casual colleagues rallying around me for the long descent down the stairs. Then a slightly surreal 90-minute walk to a friend's backyard. 18 hours later, I was barefoot in my kitchen over a steaming pot of apricot jam, loving my gas stove. I always appreciated the blackout as a memory snapshot of the time, waiting for the big, big change ahead. There's a whole lot to unpack in that story, but you got a pregnant woman, 8.5 months pregnant, 30-some stories up in the air. The elevator dies, and the the coworkers help get her down those stairs. So, work together. I couldn't imagine abandoning a pregnant lady, 30-some stories in the air. But for her to have a gas stove, I thought that's pretty cool. This one was neat. This one was, anyway, Aya Greenland was her name. She left her office on Bay Street to pick up her husband from a rehabilitation institute. He was a day patient. He'd been recovering as a stroke victim and he needed a wheelchair. It soon became clear that the transit bus that normally took us home wouldn't be coming to meet us. Makes sense. We only lived a couple of miles away. Whew. So I could walk and push the wheelchair. Said like a real city person, of course. The only problem was I was wearing high heels. Oh boy. We headed home, zigging and zagging along the side streets to give my husband something interesting to look at. The side streets were out and the roads were packed with cars. I thought it was going to be dangerous until at every intersection, fellow city people dove into the street and acted as volunteer crossing guards to enable us to navigate the intersection safely. We felt like visiting royalty. Partway home, we stopped at a convenience store, bought a bag full of popsicles, and handed them out to fellow travelers. I thought that was a really cute story. But yeah, like Chris Dixon says, a couple city miles is like 10. It's a great story. I just think it's unnecessary risk. And I think I probably would have just went to the facility, got a cot, and stayed there with my hubby for the night because, you're not, anyway, you have a husband in a wheelchair, so it's going to be hard for you to egress anywhere. You're wearing high heels, so you're not prepared for it. And it's dark. Not a good idea. This one was from a lady named Lynn. She said, a funny thing happened on the day of the blackout. I decided to drive from downtown Toronto to my parents' farm outside of Owen Sound because they had a wood stove, oil lamps, and water. I wanted to be sure I had enough gas to get there, so I grabbed a gas can from the garage and added the gas can to the tank, thinking it was gas for the mower. Turns out someone, who shall remain nameless, had filled it with water instead of gas. Whew. Anyway, luckily, the garage around the corner towed my car, successfully removed the water, but they didn't have the gas to start the car. So I had to walk up the street to the gas station and stood as the only person without a car in the line between cars to get gas. Took the gas back to the station, filled up the car, drove to my parents' farm. So again, a bunch of mistakes, but the biggest one was putting something in a container that shouldn't have been there. I'll tell you guys a story. I don't think I've ever told you about this before, but as a teenager, I still love pop, but anyway, I was down in Dad's basement one time, and he had a bottle, looked like a 2-liter bottle of Big 8 pop. That was a brand that Sobe sold out there, and it was grape, and it looked good. So I opened it up, and I was about to take a drink, and for some reason, Dad come in the basement where I was, and he hollered, "Don't!" And so I turned to the side, and it splashed down, and it was some kind of chemical he had in a damn pop bottle. If I wasn't so fucking stupid, I would have realized that it was bright blue and he'd written on it in Sharpie. But like Nate says, smell before you pour, smell before you drink. I get it. She was probably stressed out and trying to make sure. She was trying to do the right thing by topping up her vehicle with stored gasoline before she headed out of town, heading to her family's farm where things would have been better. But anyway, what happened, right? So the next thing, the interesting thing, and I remember this from the news. Of course, this was less than 2 years post 9/11. And when a bad situation like this happens, people speculate. Again, two things. People want to be doing something and they want to have answers. They want to know why this unknown thing is happening. And so people speculated, and the politicians speculated, and the news speculated. And it ended up being just a simple little software bug that caused this. But of course, the Prime Minister of Canada, Jean Chrétien, initially announced that the blackout was caused by lightning in northern New York State. Don't have a sweet friggin' clue where he got that idea from. Nobody knows, but he had to retract it later on. That's not too bad. The next one, Canada's Defense Minister, John McCallum, said later on that the blackout originated at a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, he did not explain his remarks, and he later retracted them as well. So first you had your politicians telling you it was a lightning strike. Then somebody said it was a nuclear power plant. You imagine. So lightning's bad enough, but all of a sudden you have a massive power outage caused by an issue at a nuclear power plant. Yeah, that's going to put people on edge. All right. The Prime Minister lied. I know. Cyber attack. How about this one? One security analyst in the private sector with close ties to the intelligence community said that some senior intelligence officials believed that China had played a role in the 2003 blackout. Wasn't true, but again, they were reporting cyber attack. Oh, how about terrorism? This is purely caution, a Defense Department official said. There is no inkling of a terrorist threat, but we're working with our colleagues at Homeland Security to make sure that it isn't. Read between the lines. Don't say shit like that. A solar flare. People thought it could have been a solar flare, which makes sense, but there was a lot of speculation that it was a solar flare that caused this because 2003 was a very, very active solar season. And I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on this, and it turned out that a couple of months later on Halloween, there was a massive solar storm, that come in on an angle and nailed the upper atmosphere of the Earth quite bad. They pumped an extra 3 terawatts in the atmosphere, and they knocked about half of all the satellites offline. I vaguely remember that in 2003, but it happened. I actually think we're going to have to do an episode on this one. I thought it was kind of cool. But it was, 2003, 2 massive solar flares, or CMEs, as they said, glanced off upper atmosphere and shut down about half of the satellites a couple of months later. But it was an active solar flare. And of course, people are going to speculate, right? It reminds me, one of my favorite movies, The Trigger Effect. If you haven't seen it, it's worth it. It's got a bit of 90s cheese to it, but it's a suburban family in the suburbs, of course. Power goes out, radios are down, phone isn't working, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. And the entire movie is just people speculating about what's going on, people sitting around, not knowing what to do, where to go, how to get there. And the entire the entire movie was just based on the unknown and how friggin' scary it is. And that's what happens. All these stories come out of, holy shit, I'm scared to death. Let's speculate. And then it becomes the old telephone game. Like when I was a kid, we used to go to Sun Fun, and that was like a summer camp for kids. And you'd sit down with 24 kids and you'd whisper something in each kid's ear. And by the time, it was, school ends at 5:00. And at the end, it was Purple Monkey Dishwasher. It made no sense at all. I don't get it at all. Waytime Design says, hubby was on his way to Ohio for a wedding when he called me exciting, hoping it was a solar flare. That's cute. And yeah, Nate says, if you want to watch a good movie about how politics work, go watch Don't Look Up. That was good for that, for sure. Yeah, it was pretty hilarious, actually. So what do you do in this unknown when you don't know what the hell's going on, right? That's the big thing. Focus on what you know. I gave this a lot of thought when I was sitting down, kind of contemplating what you do, because again, we talk about wanting to do something, wanting to go somewhere, wanting to do something. But then the other part of it was wanting to know why it happened. And that's where a lot of conspiracy theories come from as well, right? Is people wondering, okay, it doesn't make sense. I need to make it make sense. So I'm going to impose my mental framework on this scenario, and I'm going to figure out what the hell's going on. But instead, if you want to be doing something, focus on what you know. The fact remains that no matter what happened, what caused a power outage for 55 million people, the power is out. That's what you know. You have to deal with it. So first off, figure out what you can do to fix your situation. Hopefully you have a generator, but if you don't, lots of things you can do. Run to your local truck stop and pick up an inverter and hook it up to your car and run an extension cord and get your fan going. Lots of things. You don't know what's going to happen, but you do know that the power's out. Don't get lost going down the rabbit hole of what might happen. Don't sit down and think, what's going to happen? How bad is it going to get? Don't play those mental gymnastics. Keep your brain busy, keep your body busy, but don't leave the house if you can help it. Focus on solutions. Focus on doing the things you can do. Focus on your neighbors if you can walk next door to do it. Think about the elderly that because every time we deal, every single one of these disasters in this disaster series, the overwhelming amount of people that die are the elderly. They're the people that need to be looked after, because before we know it, we're going to be friggin' elderly too, aren't we? But, deal with the present, but prepare for the long haul, at least a couple of days. I mean, more than that, but at least a couple of days. When we had that massive power outage in Nova Scotia due to it was hurricane strength winds with a blizzard in the wintertime. We ended up early on, we pulled all the ice cream out of the coolers at the Dairy Queen, because we knew if we didn't, they would have ended up just melting and making a huge mess in there. Now, the power came back on 3 or 4 hours later. We might have got away with leaving them in there. We might not have, but prepare like it's going to be a long time, because that could mean the difference. Every time the power would go out at Sobeys when Dad worked there, they had to strip the cases, the open face cases, or at least put cardboard over them, because they had to prep like it was going to be a long time. And if it wasn't, great, turn it back on. But don't let your brain get away from you, and don't let it play all these games of what if it's the big one, what if something, just deal with what's in front of you. And then if you don't know, try to get some communication. Like Nate said, radios, of course, if you have a battery, first off, if you don't have a battery powered radio, we all have issues, but get yourself a little hand crank radio, a little battery radio. I've got a couple little shortwave ones up there that one takes a rechargeable battery, one takes some AAA batteries, something like that. But, also have an AM FM radio, something like that, or hop in your vehicle and listen to that too. Satellite radio. That is, I remember Stephen Harris on the Survival Podcast, probably 10 years ago now, talking about how much of a tool satellite radio was. And I thought, that seems foolish. That's just such a superfluous kind of thing. But it's not, because you have access to radio stations from at least around the continent. So in this instance, you've got power that isn't working in kind of the northeastern quadrant of the U.S., but you got 3/4 of the continent that still has power. So if they know something, you're going to find out, right? Ham radio. I had to put ham radio in there for you, Nate, because if I didn't, I knew you'd be sad. But it's true, and again, it could be speculation, but it might not be either. You can at least get some information. Try to know you've got good sources out there if you can. Dixon says a satellite phone, they're not super expensive anymore. And they're not, you're right. And Jules says, I put an EMP shield on my truck, best insurance policy I ever bought. And dude, I can tell you, I've talked about these EMP shields a lot, and they've been tested for EMP and CME, but when it comes down to it, what I love about them is they protect against a lightning strike. They're sacrificial, I guess anode isn't the right term, but they're a device that sits there waiting to suck up all that power and blow itself out instead of everything else. And I like that. I'm a big fan of insurance. I think insurance is an underutilized prep as a prepper. Quite often we look at things like insurance and roadside assistance as things that real preppers don't need, but I think the real prepper is the type of guy who has that kind of stuff, or who bugs out early and goes and sits in a hotel and has a cold drink instead of sitting at home wondering, shit, I should have just left a little earlier, right? Simple as that. But, you know, to sum it all up, and I mean, every one of these disasters, it kind of comes the same. It's a fun mental exercise to look at the scenarios that happen, the people that end up, you know, getting hurt or expire because of these events, but hopefully bringing to light some of these old, I mean, it's 2003 doesn't seem that long ago, guys, but it really, really is now. And Nate wants to know, did you get yours out in at the house? I think if we're talking about the EMP shield, I do. I have it installed on my electric panel. And he's probably talking about ham, maybe. I have not got my ham installed yet. I'm going to talk to you when I come down and see you on the 14th of September. But, you know, when it comes down to it, prepping for any emergency kind of helps you be prepared for all of them. Backup power. And I don't care which way you want to go with it, whether it's a power station, which I'm kind of fond of them, but they're not, you know, you're not going to run an air conditioner off a power station for very long unless it's a 3,000 watt one or something like that. But you couple that with some solar panels and you have something, at least, you know, a small generator. And then, you know, like people say, if I live in a 34th floor apartment, well, generator may or may not work depending on how much you want to pay attention to the rules or not. But even if you live in the burbs and you want to hook up an inverter to your battery, whatever, but have some form of backup power. You know, the poor guy that had one arm left and was suffering from skin grafts, you know, he may not have been in a position to prep at that point, but hopefully his caretakers really should have done something like that. And then look after your health. Anytime these things happen, the support systems that we're used to in North America, the things that make life easy, the air conditioner that doesn't mean you got to get stressed out over heat, you know, the vehicle that'll take you long distances without having to, those kind of things, you know, with going long distances without needing to walk, the elevator that allows you to skip the stairs. Everything in modern society is designed to keep us unhealthy, make it easier and simple and not work you at all. So we have to work hard at that. And that's a struggle for everybody. And then the last thing, man, is just don't do goddamn stupid things. How many times do we end up seeing some sort of Darwin Award winner based on the results of one of these, you know, catastrophes? You know, think about that poor kid's parents. I know, whatever, right? 17 years old. I say poor kid. I mean, he was the dumbass that was up there, but still, get up there. What are you doing in the middle of a blackout on the roof of a friggin' Sport Check or Foot Locker, beating through the ceiling to get a bunch of sneakers? You end up dying because of it. How stupid, how much of a waste of a life is that? Just stay home. Look after the people that love you. Look after the people that you love. And beyond that, man, it's just common friggin' sense. But yeah, Chris Dixon says, I always see the concrete stairs are out of order at the mall. I dig you, brother. Absolutely. And he says you could run a really nice fan for a long time off one of those power stations. Yeah, you could, a long time. Let's see. So one of those box fans on high, if I remember, I think is 60 or 80 watts. So on high, I know on low it was less than 40. So even on low, to circulate some air, you're going to run that for 12 hours. On high, you're probably maybe going to get 6 or 8 hours. So you can get a whole overnight with that, or, you know, so it's definitely something. And Jules says, with the corrupt economic industrial complex, I'm thinking take the cash you'd pay on insurance policies and put it away, become your own insurance company. Here's my thing. I'm going to politely disagree with that. I think you can do both. I don't begrudge you for saying that at all, because I totally dig exactly what you're saying. But I'm the type of person that's going to, you know, prep like there's no tomorrow, but live like there is. And so I'm going to do both if I can. I'm going to keep stacking my coins. I'm going to keep stacking my silver and my gold, and I'm going to buy insurance too. And I get it, because it can be it can be expensive and it's difficult. But I would say that it's still much more likely to have a flat on the side of the road or to get really, really bad medical news than it is for an EMP or a CME. And I think if you get all that first stuff covered, then hell yeah, go after all the other stuff too, because I got no problem being prepared for any and all of it. So that's what I got for tonight, guys. This was a fun one. I absolutely love the natural disaster series. I've kind of been really digging it. And what do we got left? About 4 weeks before I head south. I have spent the last 3 days recording, editing, uploading, shining up. I've got 2 months worth of review videos in the can on YouTube. So when I leave, I'm not going to have to upload a review video from the time I leave middle of September till the time I get back the 1st of November after our vacation. And it also looks like, as you can just imagine, we're going to do the prudent thing and not go to Hawaii at the end of October. So I think we might spend some time exploring Nashville with my in-laws. I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure yet, but pretty sure Hawaii is off the table at this point. I don't think it's a smart move to go there, and for a lot of reasons, if you know what I mean. But it's been a good time. Tomorrow night, it'll be Becky and I. Sunday night is up in the air right now for what I'm going to be doing. There'll be an episode there for sure. And then now next week is going to be a little messed up, and I haven't exactly decided. So keep an eye on the schedule, because it's the last kind of weekend before school starts back up, and we're going up to the indoor wave park, the theme park with the kids. We're taking a 3-night vacation away with the family. So we won't be doing any live streams while I'm up there, but I think what I'll do is I'll live stream early on Thursday and have a pre-recorded episode for you. And then I'll be back in time to do Sunday night's episode. So it'll be fun. I love, I appreciate you guys being flexible with me. I don't really want to, hey, M Sir Rifle, I probably MSU Rifle 97 said we'll be looking for you in Nashville. I appreciate it. I like Nashville. I enjoyed it. And then we might go down to Daytona Beach for a few days. We haven't decided for sure, but I'm going to be spending some time down in Tennessee, which I always appreciate. So yeah, so tomorrow night will be Becky and I show. Sunday night will be going to be some sort of interview show. Things got juggled around last minute. I haven't made plans for it yet, but we'll have something there. And then next week, things are going to be you'll still get 3 shows, but things will be all messed up a little bit. But they'll be here. Some of them will be, at least Fridays, will be pre-recorded. But Thursdays will be an early show in the morning. And then, yeah, beyond that, it's going to be great. And then after that, we'll have a whole bunch of, we got about 3 weeks of the regular content coming out. And then I'll be hitting the road. And you'll still get your shows, but it'll be a little different. Yes, I will catch you at Self-Reliance Festival as well. We've got a big pile of Self-Reliance Festival people there. And on the Thursday before SRF, we are doing a get-together / work day at the Delinquent Gully, which is our 10-acre parcel that we own 40 minutes south of Camden. So if anybody's around and wants to come down there, that's going to be fun. And also, I think I said the 14th, but I believe it's the 16th, where I'm going to be at Nate and Aaron's place. It's that Saturday, the middle Saturday in September. So we're going to be having a workshop get together there as well. If you want the super secret invite link and the directions on how to get there, we can get them to you in the Telegram group. We'll send you the link. And we have certain yes, Jules, I can't wait to see you at Midwest Preparedness Project. I'm excited about that. It's going to be an awesome 6 weeks. I can't wait. So guys, I tell you, I appreciate you. This is awesome. I think we topped out at 20 people tonight, which, man, a year ago, 20 would have just seemed absolutely impossible. But we got a great community here. I appreciate you guys so much. Dixon says they've decided on mid-April for the road trip. Let's make it happen. Sounds good. It's awesome. Yeah, I know I tell you I appreciate you guys a lot, but I really, really do mean it. I love that you come in here. I love the fact that we can sit here and chat and carry on and have a great time and support each other and respectfully disagree and empower one another at the same time. So with that, you know where we go from here. Stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.